I wonder if we could take our seats, please. Take our seats. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start. If we could, thank you. The debate before us is, and I'll be explaining how you're going to vote in just a second, this House believes that 21st century learners need their heads filled with pure facts. For those who don't, well, my name is Nick Ferrari. For those who do know me, I can only apologise. For those who don't, I present a radio show in the UK, which has now unbelievably gone to the third biggest share in the London market in radio listening without any help from the Kremlin. I promise you, well, that I'm prepared to admit to anyway. I promise you a debate that will be livelier than President Trump's Twitter feed, because this is a very exciting. If you wanted to ask what I do, it's a news show, as the minister here knows, because he comes on the show very often. In fact, it's surprising to see that he's actually prepared to talk to me. But the Duke of Edinburgh, I was once in a receiving line for the Duke of Edinburgh, who's a fantastic guy, and he came up to me and said, "So what exactly do you do?" So I said, "Well, sir, my show is all about the mistakes of politicians and the misdeeds of celebrities and stars." And quick as that, Prince Philip shot back, "Well, you're never bloody short of stuff then, are you?" So so that's what we do. The debate today, and I'm going to ask you to vote, really focuses on what's been described as effectively a knowledge deficit. As you can see from my age, I come from a time where I chanted everything. I chanted times tables, I chanted French verbs, I chanted German verbs, I learnt in that way. My sons, who are, well, one's 30 now, one's in his late 20s, I remember helping them with schooling one time, and I was absolutely horrified at how they were learning French. I remember it was a fee-paying school. I stormed up there the next day. What the bloody hell is going on? I'm paying all this money. He doesn't know je regarde, tu regarde, il regarde, nous regardons. And they said, "Don't worry about it." We've got some French here, thank God. We said, "Don't worry about it. It's all going to be fine." I said, "You don't know what you're talking about." Both boys got A's in their GCSE, so clearly there's something. But it is the idea of how important are facts in this modern world, where people I'm looking at now, everybody in this room is younger than I am, your children, your children's children, will now learn in such a different way. What this is essentially about, do facts matter now in the modern age? And that's what we're here to debate. Very briefly, we have four great speakers, all of whom are going to have 7 minutes each. And it's not a hard 7 minutes, so if it gets to 7 minutes 30, they'll start to hear this. 8 minutes to start to hear this. If they're still going after 10, it'll get like this and we'll bang them off. So that's just basically how it's going to go. But at the heart of this is we're going to take a vote now, because that's what it's all about. So, as Ruth has helpfully instructed me, if you'd like to take, is it called a clicker, Ruth? Is that what we call? Okay. If you'd like to take your clicker, I will now read the debate one last time. Well, last time for now. This House believes that 21st century learners need their heads filled with pure facts. If you are for the motion, please press button A. If you are against, button B. If you're undecided, button C. So if you are for the motion, please A. If you are against, button B. And if, well, there we're playing, I think, from Vicas's own iPad there. It's very nice. And C, undecided. Would you please press the button? And there we have it. So for, if I'm looking at this, wow, 20%, 67 against, 13, let me just make a note of those because I've got to read those again, and we will move to the first debate. Now, I'm going to say again. Are you happy? Am I hearing anger or anything? No, everybody happy? Yeah, 20, 67, 13. We have got 4 great people to speak, and I need to just tell each team, as you go through the debate, one of you will make a wrapping up 3 minutes at the end. So if you want to determine between your team who that is going to be, as you make, that will be very helpful. We're going to hear from each of them. Coming up, in no particular order, let me tell you who we've got here, and perhaps you could raise your hands and enjoy the applause of the House. First up, Daisy Christodoulou, who's Head of Assessment at ARC Schools. Give everybody a wave. That's Daisy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests. Let's keep the applause going for Nick Gibb, who's Minister of Schools from the United Kingdom, of course. Thanks, Nick. Andrea Schleicher is on my left here, Director for Education at Skills at the OECD. Thank you very much. And Gabrielle Zinni is Executive Director at the INET. A round of applause to Gabrielle. So let's move straight to the debate. Mr. Gibb, I'm going to move to you if I first may. Minister, 7 minutes begins when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel quite at home in this setting, although This is more opulent, and there's more legroom in this set than the real House of Commons. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, Gradgrind Dickens's caricature of oppressive Victorian schoolmasters. This quote carries cultural capital throughout the world. Now what I want is facts. Teach these boys and girls nothing but facts. Facts alone are what are wanted in life. Plant nothing else, and root out everything else. You can only form the minds of reasoning animals upon facts. Nothing else will ever be of any service to them. Well, this harsh, unbending, and archaic caricature has become the bête noire of the international movement for what I like to call progressive education, the unevidenced orthodoxies that prevail at international education conferences around the world. This ideology, and it is an ideology, prizes the teaching of ill-defined skills such as creativity, communication, and critical thinking, so-called 21st century skills, above the importance of knowledge, despite the overwhelming body of evidence that says that you become creative and better at critical thinking by being taught a knowledge-rich curriculum full of concepts, not simple facts. So looking at the title, what is a pure fact? For that matter, what is an impure fact? The title of this debate suggests that those supporting a knowledge-based curriculum do so at the expense of ensuring pupils become rounded individuals. The image of passive pupils having their heads filled with useless facts dislocated from wider context. That's the notion that this title seems to convey. But that, of course, is not what we mean when we talk about a knowledge-based curriculum. It's not the dates of reigns of monarchs that matter, but what happens in between these dates, the narrative, the decisions, the complexity, the principles and passions of the events that happen in history. And this is typical of debates like this, Mr. Speaker, where the anti-knowledge orthodoxy is so ingrained. Consider the title of this debate again. When talking to a constituent who lives in my area of England, if I were to refer to a school child as a learner rather than a pupil, they would think I was going mad. Yet this ideologically driven lexicon, which seeks to undermine the traditional relationship between teachers and pupils, is ubiquitous in international education conferences. But the motion does contain some truth. A broad, knowledge-rich education is at least as essential for life in the 21st century as it was in any previous century. Yet the education world is awash with claims that the proliferation of technology has changed the role of teachers. It's argued that teachers no longer need to teach pupils the facts and events of history or the facts and concepts of science because they can just look them up on their smartphone. They can just Google it. Instead, it's argued that the context of the 21st century justifies a focus on so-called 21st century skills as opposed to knowledge. And the position is perhaps best summarized by this quote. This makes your case for you, by the way. This quote. But then I'll knock it down. I quote, "We find ourselves in a rapidly changing and unpredictable culture. It seems almost impossible to foresee the particular ways in which it will change in the near future or the particular problems which will be paramount in 5 or 10 years. Under these conditions, much emphasis must be placed in schools on the development of generalized ways of attacking problems and on knowledge which can be applied to a wide range of new situations. That is, we have the task of preparing individuals for problems that cannot be foreseen in advance, and about all that can be done under such conditions is to help the student acquire generalized intellectual abilities and skills which will serve him well in many new situations." Well, that was from Bloom's taxonomy. And according to Bloom, we were then on the precipice of a great new age, and education must change to keep up with the times. Bloom said that in 1956. And no, this age is not different. The invention of Google and smartphones has not changed these tired old arguments. So I ask you, when was the following written? And I quote again, "Educated people are not those who know everything, but rather those who know where to find, at a moment's notice, the information they desire." When was that written? In 1996, when Google was founded? Or in 2007, after the launch of the iPhone? In fact, that was written in 1914. These tired arguments are not new, and they are not based, Mr. Speaker, on any evidence. As E.D. Hirsch wrote in the year 2000, there is a consensus in cognitive psychology that it takes knowledge to gain knowledge. Those who repudiate a fact-filled curriculum on the grounds that kids can always look things up miss the paradox that de-emphasizing factual knowledge actually disables children from looking things up effectively. To stress process at the expense of factual knowledge actually hinders children from learning to learn. Yes, the internet has placed a wealth of information at our fingertips, but to be able to use that information, to absorb it, to add to our knowledge, we must already possess a storehouse of knowledge. That is the paradox disclosed by cognitive research. That's E.D. Hirsch. The scientific evidence is clear on this point. The Deans for Impact group best summed up the cognitive science research when they said, each subject area has some set of facts that, if committed to long-term memory, aids problem solving by freeing working memory resources and illuminating contexts in which existing knowledge and skills can be applied. Pupils, Mr. Speaker, are novices.
If you could move to your conclusion,
nearly
please,
there,
Mr. Gibb.
nearly there,
Thank you
Mr.
indeed.
Speaker.
Thank you.
Nearly there. Pupils are novices, and the scientific research is overwhelming on the differences in the way experts and novices learn. It does not suffice to provide novices with general strategies for finding information, nor does it suffice to teach pupils generic skills such as problem solving. As Bransford, Brown and Cocking state, experts have acquired extensive knowledge that affects what they notice and how they organize, represent, and interpret information in their environment. This, in turn, affects their ability to remember, reason, and solve problems. So I would urge you to skeptically vote for the motion today. It's badly worded, but I hope, more importantly, you will understand the importance of knowledge in our school curriculum throughout the world. Thank you very much.
Your appreciation for Mr. Gibb. Thank you. Thank you indeed, Mr. Gibb. Never has he spoken so courteously to me in his life, I tell you, as he does on the road. There we go. I'll remember that, Nick. Please, your appreciation for the start of the other side of this. Welcome, Andreas Schleicher, Director of Education and Skills at the OECD. Mr. Schleicher.
Thank you, Speaker. And I want to start by saying that everyone in this room understands the crucial role of knowledge in learning. The debate here is not about the relevance of knowledge or irrelevance of a knowledge-based curriculum. The motion in front of us here is that schools should fill the heads of 21st century learners with pure facts. That motion just not only lacks any sense, I almost consider it close to a criminal offense. Because it does make students just almost as smart as a smartphone. And in fact, the dilemma that we see for educators today precisely is the kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test, the reproduction of subject matter content are precisely the kind of things that robots are taking over so generously as we speak. There's no question that state-of-the-art knowledge is a key foundation. You can only learn by learning something, but in fact, making this as a goal and the idea that we should just chuck that into the minds of people is sort of something that will just make them up for failure. The world no longer rewards us just for what we know. The world rewards us for being able to apply, use, and creatively use what we knew in novel situations. And again, that is not a new phenomenon. That's always been the case. Take science and learning. Success in science is not just about what you know in biology, chemistry, and physics, as important as that is. In fact, what you know there may be already out of date by the time you graduate. What is important is your capacity to think like a scientist, to reason scientifically, to distinguish evidence from hypothesis, facts from other things. This is basically what success today is about. And where you can do that, you can actually be the master of knowledge as well. Now, some say, well, you know, once we have filled people up with knowledge, they're going to do it. They're going to be able to apply it. Actually, all the evidence speaks against it. And without wanting to offend anyone in this room, this country where we are here, the UAE, is the perfect example. In fact, you find few countries where students are better able to reproduce facts. And you give them a test that is a knowledge test. The UAE does perfectly. You can look at the PISA test, you can look at other tests. And the reproduction of subject matter content is what the UAE does great. The moment you ask students to extrapolate from what they know, to apply their knowledge creatively, to transfer their knowledge to other situations, they don't get anywhere. That's the kind of PISA task where students fail dismally. So the idea, you know, you just drill knowledge and then everything else comes out as a byproduct is simply wrong. And you find other countries around the world with the same kind of phenomenon. Very common in Eastern Europe, you know, the same kind of phenomenon that students actually have learned to memorize facts, lots of facts, but they are not able to extrapolate. Success today is about curiosity, is about open-mindedness, is about making connection between ideas that seem unrelated, and that requires a different way of learning. That requires methods of learning that go beyond the, you know, just having students memorize facts. If you look to countries that get it right, take Singapore as an example. What is at the heart of the curriculum in Singapore? The reproduction of facts? Well, that was the case in the 1940s and the 1950s. Today, Singapore has placed values and not facts at the center of its curriculum. It's putting the primary emphasis on respect, responsibility, resilience, integrity, care, and harmony. Does it mean that there is no longer a role for knowledge? Absolutely not. You find a greater role for knowledge in the Singaporean curriculum than in many other systems. But those values are at the heart of it. And the values determine the learning environments and the ways in which children learn and the knowledge that's being tested. Every piece of knowledge that enters the Singaporean curriculum, and you can look at other high-performing education systems as well, is tested to what extent it fosters the kind of character, attributes, and qualities that Singapore wants to see among its children. That's the critical test of truth that we should pass through. It's about rigor in the curriculum. That means high levels of cognitive demand, challenging students to think. It's about focus, having the courage to think fewer things, fewer facts at greater depths. That's the key. And it's about coherence, basically understanding better how students learn. That is really the kind of education that we are trying to give to our own children. And that's why I think it's really an offense to think it's enough to chuck the heads of other people's children just full of facts. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Just before we come to the second round of speakers, you will have plenty of time for questions, so if there's points you want to bear in mind, we're coming to that after we hear from our second round, as I say. And speaking for the motion, please applause for Daisy Christodoulou. Daisy.
Ladies and gentlemen, so I think, first of all, in debates like this, it's very important for us to establish the points we agree on so that we can focus all the more clearly on the things where we disagree. So I would like to make it clear that there is a lot of agreement, I think, between the two sides today. We completely agree with the opposition that the critical thinking, that problem solving, that the application of knowledge and reasoning strategies are vital in the modern world. And we also completely agree that the task of modern education should be to equip pupils with such skills. And we also agree that the education system in very many countries does need to be fundamentally re-engineered in order to achieve these aims. And in fact, it's precisely because we agree so profoundly on these points that we disagree so profoundly with the opposition as to the correct role of facts in education. Because for us on this side of the house, the way we will achieve all of these vital and indeed noble aims is through filling the heads of pupils, not learners, with pure facts. And I think the opposition have performed an interesting sleight of hand in that they conceded the importance of some facts, of the basics, but then argue that education is so much more than that. And in this way, I think they hope to persuade you that they are the moderates, arguing for a little bit of facts and a little bit of skill and creativity. Well, as I've said, we do agree with them about the importance of skill, and we agree with them about the importance of creativity and problem solving. And we think the way to achieve these skills is through acquiring facts. And why do we think this? Because of the evidence from cognitive science about exactly how the human mind works. And the modern scientific evidence on how we acquire such complex reasoning skills is very, very clear. And in this speech, I'd like to use this evidence to extend the arguments of the first speaker in two ways. So first of all, I want to show how the scientific evidence tells us that these vital higher-order skills don't just depend on knowledge, that to a very large extent they are knowledge. And second, I'll show that an important implication of this research is that in order to achieve and acquire such higher-order skills, we have to take part in activities that look very different to them. The ends look different to the means. So first then, the evidence on what skill is. And skills such as creativity and problem solving are specific to particular subject areas. And to the extent that we can talk about anyone as being a creative genius or a good critical thinker or a good problem solver, it's because they have a deep and broad knowledge in a range of different areas, across a whole range of subject areas. And in fact, one of my favorite papers, scientific papers on this, is called, Could Steven Spielberg Have Managed the Yankees? The idea being, if you're a creative genius in one field, does it transfer across to another? And the answer in that paper is no, he couldn't. So these higher order skills that we all agree are so important are in fact the function of these broad and deep webs of knowledge that are stored in long-term memory, not in Google, and which allow us to think about the world and the new problems we face in sophisticated and smart ways. And however brilliant information technology gets, and however quick you can run a search on a search engine, you will still need those facts in long-term memory, because that's what allows you to free up the space in your working memory, in your consciousness, to be able to grapple with the new problems that the 21st century will undoubtedly throw at us. And to dismiss these webs of knowledge in long-term memory as just being the basics, as something that perhaps can be polished off in the first 10 minutes of a lesson or the first few years of an education system, it is fundamentally to misunderstand what they are and to misunderstand the role of knowledge in these higher-order thinking processes. As the scientist John Anderson said, all that there is to intelligence is the simple accrual and tuning of many small units of knowledge that in total produce complex cognition. The whole is no more than the sum of its parts, but it has a lot of parts. And that's it. There's a lot of it. And it's easy for us as adults to forget this vital importance of knowledge and the amount of knowledge we need, precisely because we have so much of it, we've embedded it so well in our long-term memories that we forget we've got it. And there's even a term for this in the literature. It's called expertise-induced blindness. So expertise-induced blindness, I think it's similar to a rich person who tells you that money doesn't matter. It's easy to be blasé about something when you've got a lot of it. And for many of us in this room, we have that knowledge and our pupils don't. And the role of an education system should be to fill their heads with that vital knowledge that civilization has built up over millennia and that cannot be discovered by any one individual in the course of a lifetime, and that cannot just be discovered through projects or through learning just from experience. And the evidence on how we read illustrates this very, very beautifully, the importance of knowledge. Take a typical newspaper headline. This one recently from the New York Times. US may soon warn China to constrain North Korea. Or one from a few years ago from The Guardian. NATO in Libya, catch-22. How does one understand those headlines? Does one understand those headlines through the application of generic skill or reasoning strategies? Does one understand them by saying, I must look at things from both sides or applying some general maxim? No, one does not. One understands those headlines by knowing history, by knowing geography, by knowing vocabulary, by even knowing the casual literary reference of catch-22. And those casual literary references, when you start looking for them, you'll see them everywhere. And you'll see how hard it is to truly understand something if you can't pick up on those references, and if you don't know where these places in the world are and these events in history that headlines and newspapers are always referring to. And similarly, when pupils, suppose you want them to understand a poem, if they struggle to decode fluently, to understand the phonetic code, if you ask them to read out a poem, their working memories are so full of the struggle of decoding print that they have no room left to think about the nuances of the poet's word choice and the beauty of his metaphor. And what's interesting is that PISA's own data shows this, because PISA's own data very interestingly shows there is a very strong correlation, if you like, between systems who perform well on traditional tests tests that you might think of as being rote learning and regurgitation, and between systems that perform very well on problem solving too. There's a very strong correlation between systems that do well on one and systems that do well on the other. And in terms of pupils, that's true as well. And I know from my time in teaching English, it was the pupils who had read the most stories who wrote the most creative stories themselves. So I think you can see in the classroom what is borne out on this system level data. Second, the scientific evidence on how we learn is that if we want our pupils to develop such skill, we need to focus on what causes skill, not on what it looks like. We need to probe deeper, not to stay on the surface. And if we do that, we find something that is quite counterintuitive. We find that by filling up a pupil's head with facts, we free up the space in working memory to think with originality and creativity. Learning facts doesn't stifle creativity, it enables it. Memorization doesn't restrict originality, it allows it. And for evidence of this, you can look at the education of any creative genius in history. And most of them, in the words of one of them, will admit that they stood on the shoulders of giants. Shakespeare, for example, is universally hailed as one of the greatest creative geniuses of all time, adding hundreds of words and phrases to the English language and breaking so many of the rules of drama that have been handed down to him.
Last 30 seconds,
we know what his
would.
education looked like. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there was nothing 21st century about it. In Shakespeare's school, pupils had to rote learn hundreds of Latin figures of speech. But just a few years after he left school, Shakespeare was using that knowledge in some of the most original and creative drama we've ever seen. And nor was this an accident. Many academics have traced Shakespeare's language directly from those schoolroom exercises in language through to the early and sometimes clunky use of rhetorical devices in the early plays like The Two Gentlemen of Verona, through to the brilliantly original and playful uses of such techniques in late plays like Hamlet and Julius Caesar. And you can see a similar pattern, as I say, in many artistic and creative geniuses. So he's not an isolated example. There's so much of that. So to sum up, therefore, 21st century learners, they do need their heads filled with pure facts because the evidence shows that it's facts that allow us to think, it's facts that allow us to reason, it's facts that allow us to be creative and to be critical. Whatever we want our pupils to achieve, the pathway is through learning facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Christodoulou. Thank you very much. Thank you. Your questions in a moment, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, but first, applause please for Gabriele Zinni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Based on what Andreas mentioned and how he promoted skills, and the way, we also think that we need to add how we teach these skills, because usually the systems and the other side argue this in their writings. So the system is the one that doesn't promote very many countries in many ways how to teach these skills. That's why I strongly believe that the way to teach these skills is through project-based teaching. Project-based learning is the best way to combine soft and hard skills. It's the way to engage students, to teach them how to collaborate, to work in teams, as Andreas was saying, to connect, to help them to connect the dots, to teach them how to co-create, to promote integration, all key skills for these coming years. In our experience in Argentina, the two moments when students are engaged the most is during two project-based competitions, Técnicamente and Olimpiadas. These are two competitions that run through 1,600 schools, and the way that they learn skills is to project-based learn, present an initiative, present an idea, a product, and compete among the rest of the schools. Polls that we developed last year showed that the best way to teach these skills, to engage students, is make them do these project-based students more than just teach them facts or teach them knowledge in general. So I do believe that changing the structure of the system, in addition to focus on skills, is needed in many, many countries. Not only in the way we teach skills, but also in the way we connect these skills to the labor market. Because many times we teach skills in schools, but they have nothing to do with the labor markets and are demanding. Many times we don't have career tracks for principals, so we don't have good principals in our schools to teach these skills. So in addition to this discussion, I think we should include in this debate how we change the structure of our system to promote these skills that Andreas was building in the first argument. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much indeed. Nice and prompt. Thank you. Thank you. So remember, your lead counsels, you have to decide who's going to have 3 minutes to rebut and wrap up your debate. So I'd ask you to start thinking about that as we take questions from the floor. Now, if you'd like to raise your hand, thank you, sir. Do we have microphones, Ruth? Yes. So it's this gentleman here. And if I could ask you to say your name, sir, and to whom you are initially directing the question. Okay. Thank you.
I am Dr. R.K. Rai, basically a doctor neurologist.
Right.
See, in the architecture of the brain, the working memory has got a capacity.
Yes.
If you go on overloading the facts by...
To whom are you addressing your question, doctor?
Pardon?
Who are you putting your question to? Do you have
Yeah.
But is there a specific side you're addressing your question to?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you speaking against it or for it? Which are you?
No, I'm speaking against.
You're speaking against it,
yes,
right?
sir.
So we might be asking one of this team to respond.
So-
Your
so-
question, if you would, doctor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My question is
Thank you, sir.
that, as per the medical science, the working memory has got a capacity. If you go on adding the mere facts, the working memory will not be able to function properly.
Will not be able to cope. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Not only that, sir. The speaker from this side said very good thing.
Right.
See, the resilience, the hope, the optimism, the empathy, which are the basic for learning.
Okay.
Which are basic for learning, because there is a part of the brain, sir, right here, amygdala.
Okay.
If you go on putting a lot of information, the amygdala will start
All right,
getting
sir.
irritated.
Okay,
and
sir.
once it gets irritated, it will affect the cerebral cortex.
Okay.
And when it affects it, you will not be able to retain the facts.
Okay, doctor,
So-
I'm grateful. I
so-
need to
so-
pass that
so-
question.
so,
Thank
sir,
you very much
sir,
indeed.
With my knowledge to the
Okay.
house.
Okay, doctor,
I'm
we
a
have
doc-
your question. If you can take your seat, please.
So
I'm
question
grateful.
is, my one half second.
Doctor, we need a response. Thank you.
Half
Yes.
second, sir. I want to just give it.
Yeah,
That-
we're getting a
that-
response.
that-
Doctor, I'd ask you to take your
that
seat
for
now.
any creativity, sir.
Doctor, yes, I'm very
for
grateful.
any
Could I ask you?
creativity, for
I don't know
any
if you understand the
creativity-
rules of this debate. Doctor, I wonder if you'd like to take your seat now. We're very grateful. Thank you very much indeed, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Who would like... Daisy Christodoulou. Thank you, Doctor. Daisy, thank you. Yes, just respond if you would. Thank you. It's the idea that basically, as I understand it, you can fill a kid's head too full of facts, is what I'm going to take from that.
So I
That's
think-
why I'm on the radio.
I think what is the case is that working memory is very limited. So the doctor is absolutely right to say that when you are presenting learning, you must absolutely break it down into small chunks. And break it down, I would say, you have to break down those complex skills into small chunks precisely because working memory is so limited. And that would be the reason why I would say that the project-based approach advocated by the opposition doesn't work, because project-based learning is extraordinarily overwhelming for working memory. So actually, the implications of the limitations of working memory are that we should break down complex skills into small bits of knowledge and practice them. And then the aim is to get them through the bottleneck of working memory into long-term memory, which is vast and is huge and is, in the words of one cognitive scientist, long-term memory is the seat of all human intellectual skill. Because long-term memory is vast and can store thousands of pieces of information, whereas working memory is limited and can store 3 to 7 pieces of information. So all the implications of the limitations of working memory suggest we should be breaking down complex skills into small chunks in order to get them through that working memory bottleneck.
Daisy Christodoulou, thank you. Let's have a question. There's a gentleman here, and then we'll take a question from a lady, if we can get, again, on this side. Gentlemen, let's take 2 questions. If you can keep the question moderately brief, and to whom you're addressing it. Question from you, sir, and then the lady down here, please. Yeah, as well. Sir.
My name's Nathan. I'm a head teacher at a school in the UK. My first point is that in a very engaging world with lots of information overload, when our children are overstimulated as it is, we have to find creative ways to engage our children and young people and even learners as effectively as we can. So overloading them with a straightforward passage of facts and information, from a practical point of view, is most definitely not a productive way. And I just have a quote that I want to leave with the people on the far side there.
Yes.
In a world of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves perfectly suited to a world that no longer exists.
Nathan, thank you. We'll put that question in just a second. Let's take a question from the lady here as well. We'll take 2 questions together. I'm hoping there's a question for the against team as well. Otherwise, these 2 are going to earn their corn. Yes, madam, thank you.
My name is Ulrike. I'm from Germany.
Yes.
I'm actually a social counselor teaching.
Would you just
the
hold the
social-
microphone a little closer to your face,
I'm
Ulrika, to your mouth?
teaching
Sorry.
social skills.
Brilliant. Yeah.
But I have a question actually to Andreas. Wanted to know, I see a lot of students that actually do have social skills, but they don't have the facts. So they cannot read or write or do some basic, don't have this basic facts. They cannot pursue the education, and they cannot enter schools because missing these facts. How would you answer this when you're saying that the most important things are the social skills?
Ulrika,
when they are missing these.
Excuse me, Ulrika, thank you. In a moment, Mr. Schleicher. Mr. Gibb, would you like to respond to Nathan's question? Overstimulated, overloading, too much facts, it's actually rather daunting for the children. Mr. Gibb.
This is the whole skills-based curriculum. That's what overloads the working memory. The working memory can only hold 5, 6, or 7 items at one time. And if you want to try and be creative and problem solve while you're busy finding out those and calculating those things that ought to be in your long-term memory, Daniel Willingham talks about an educated person has vast amounts of knowledge in his or her long-term memory, which you can retrieve instantly. So if you're doing a calculation, you can't suddenly work out what 7 6s are. You need to know it already that it's 42, so you can do more complicated calculations. Overload occurs when you are requiring people to remember too many facts in short-term memory at once, instead of being able to retrieve from long-term memory the things that you need to be creative and to solve the problem. And an education is about getting as many of those concepts and facts and knowledge and complexity of knowledge into your long-term memory, so that your short-term memory, the minimal, small working memory, can then draw on those things in your long-term memory to solve problems and be creative. That's the thrust of the argument on this side of the House.
Mr. Gibb, thank you. Now to Andreas Schleicher, if you'd respond. Ulrika talked about students who have social skills, Mr. Schleicher, but they don't have facts, they can't read or write, they can't actually pursue a proper or full education. Mr. Schleicher.
Yeah, I agree with the premise. I think that's one of the, we have people, you know, who have great social skills and who may not have the kind of knowledge and understanding. You know, if you are in that position, you can lead a mafia, but you can't get a job. I mean, that is very clear, but I think we should not ignore the other part of the equation as well. We have lots of people who are full of facts and full of kind of memorized knowledge, but they don't have the kind of critical thinking and social skills to actually do anything reasonable in our modern society or to add value to what a computer can do. So the issue is not, I mean, I think this is sort of the kind of artificial kind of divide that we're creating here. The issue is not, you know, does knowledge detract from skills? The issue is how do we integrate in a modern learning environment the development of knowledge in a way that actually strengthens social and emotional qualities together. That there are great examples of this is proven by the evidence. I come back to the example of countries like Singapore or even Shanghai. They're very strong on knowledge, but their curriculum is centered on values, on ideas, on concepts. They have a great emphasis on creative skills. And they're doing both. Singapore was the top performer on creative problem-solving skills. That is something I think we should keep in mind, that actually this is an artificial construct that we say, and that filling people with pure facts is leading them to be creative or social, having great social skills. I think that is fundamentally wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Schleicher. Questions this side? Yeah, there's a gentleman with a blue shirt here. Sir, if I could have your name and your question. Thank you.
Michael.
Hello, Michael.
Michael from the United States. And my question is for the side supporting the motion that we have.
Yep.
With science showing us the strong correlation between empathy and success in life, whether it's financial or just joy of living, how does one teach through pure facts such an important concept such as empathy?
Who wants to address that? Mr. Gibb.
Say that, at the beginning of this debate, both Daisy and myself pointed out that the motion is biased in the way it's drafted. Nobody here wants pure facts. We want knowledge that includes facts. And in all the best schools around the world, that is what they do. The danger of this debate is that you are encouraging new education systems, you are encouraging new education reform to move away from a knowledge-based curriculum. You will then find, in 10 or 20 years' time, a declining education system where children are no longer knowledgeable enough to be creative or to solve problems or to find cures for diseases and cancer. Now, the issue of empathy, of course, we want schools to be more than just academic institutions. Of course you have sport, and you have music, and you have behavioral policies. You make sure that the pastoral care of a school is about more than the academic curriculum. Every good school is like that. But this debate isn't about that. I go to these conferences and I hear education ministers and experts from other countries and my country encouraging education systems around the world to abandon a knowledge-rich curriculum and to put in its place a competence-based, skills-based curriculum that degrades the importance of knowledge. And the reason why I speak so passionately about this is because we did this in Britain. We did it in the 1990s and 2000s. Look at our 2007 curriculum. Look at the new Scottish curriculum for excellence. Look at the proposed curriculum they're going to put into Wales. They are a disaster. We came into office in 2010 to put it right because we saw the danger and the damage it was doing. And it was doing the most damage to people from disadvantaged backgrounds who don't have educated parents, who can take them to museums, who can make them read. If you believe in social justice, you will want a knowledge-based curriculum.
Thank you, Mr. Gibb. Thank you indeed. Thank you, Mr. Gibb. Can I get a question for this side of the House, please? Do we have a question for this side of the House? We do. The lady here? Yes. Can we get a mic to the lady here, third row back, please? It is a question for this side of the House. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Could I get your name as well?
My name is Mariam Ismail.
Hi.
And what I wanted to say is when he talks about Singapore and Hong Kong, he's talking about cultures that are different from Western cultures. So they don't apply.
Okay, no, that's fine. Culture clash. Mr. Who wants to take that on? One of you has to. I mean, I could come round, but I won't get it very, very right. It's probably best if you do. Mr. Schleicher.
I do hear that argument, every day, that, culture is inherited, we can't do much about it. I do believe that actually the culture, and particularly the culture of learning, is very much created by what we do. Many of the systems that are today at the top of the league have not been there for very long. In fact, Hong Kong is a great example, Korea is a great example. In the 1940s and the 1950s, in the 1960s, they were at the bottom of the league. Today they're at the top, not because of their culture. Their culture hasn't changed. It's because of what they did in education. And actually, each and every of them has a very rich curriculum. They have an instructional system that is actually well balanced in terms of the knowledge and the skills and the character qualities that they develop. And they do not frame everything they do around the reproduction of facts. They have at their center ideas and concepts and values. And I do think that's something that we can learn from. It's not about copying and pasting, absolutely not. But I think it's worthwhile for all of us to look around the world. Where do we see the most advanced education systems and what we can learn from them?
All right. Quick response, if you would, because just a quick response to the follow-up there. Have you another line to say?
I simply don't believe in that. I do think
Okay,
there's a lot of variability within countries and across countries. There's a lot of scope for us to actually do learn from the world's best experiences.
Thank you indeed, Michelle. I think we've got time possibly for one more question. We take one, so whoever puts their hand up first gets the final question. Can we bring it up here? This gentleman's tried a couple of times. Gentleman in a check shirt here. We're going to take the question from here. You will have, I'm sorry to say, the last question, quite a fiery debate. Go ahead, sir. What is your question?
My name is Edward. I'm a high school math teacher who struggles with teaching the critical thinking skills and the process-based, and in doing that with high-level math in secondary. I teach them these skills and the working memory because they are trying to do the basic things that were never transformed there. In the lesson that I'm given, they're spending so much time using their resources and their devices and their things. I can't actually give them the skills because they know how to find them, but there is the time lag and they can't interpret the data because they don't have those references. And how do we reconcile those two competing things in the speed?
How they use their device. Okay, so I sense this is for this side, would you? Yes, it is indeed. Mr. Schleicher, I look back to you. Gabriel Zinni, will you take this one? The use of the devices and obviously how, as this teacher, if you'd stand up and address the House, I'd be grateful. Thank you, Mr. Zinni.
I think that you raised an excellent debate that we are facing, at least in my country. And really, I think that at the end of the debate is engaging the student what we should do. Because I think that the pure fact knowledge curriculum that ISA is proposing doesn't engage students. We tried in Argentina, we tried in Latin America. Students are dropping out from school. Students are not keeping engaged. So I think that what you're doing is the way to do it. It might be hard, because it might be hard to bring all these devices, but bringing devices to the classroom and bringing other ways of project-based learning has much to do with what students do outside the classroom these days than what we're teaching now in our classrooms in Latin America. So I think that we have to consider and have that in mind when we define all these 50 years old experts here defining curriculums. We have to check what's going on at the classroom with 12, 15 years old guys who have nothing to do, what they see at the classroom has nothing to do with the reality outside the classroom. So I think the way to go is what you're doing, but I agree, it challenges how to combine the attention and hard and soft skills in the same way.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions. Just before I ask whichever lead counsel wants to come from either side, it's been a very interesting debate. I do hope that Donald Trump or someone of his team we've all heard about fake news. We now have pure facts, with a whole new suggestion as well. We heard from Nick Gibb. He took us back to the days of grad grind and the importance of the kings and queens of England. Andreas Schleicher talked about thinking like a scientist, a different way of coping. Daisy Christodoulou talked about equipping pupils with skills, scientific evidence as well, and took us back through various headlines. My favourite headline when I lived and worked in the States was 7-foot doctors go in strike in Milwaukee. Now, there's two ways really. There's either 7-foot doctors, which is incredible, or I love that one, 7-foot doctors go on strike in Milwaukee. And Gabriel Zini talked about what he does in his native Argentina, connecting skills and how important that is with the labour market. Now, to sum up, and we will say in that order, if we may, Mr. Gibb and Ms. Christodoulou, who is lead counsel for your side? Mr. Gibb, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
So, my question is, could Steven Spielberg have managed the Yankees? Spielberg is creative. Spielberg can solve problems. Why then can't he manage the Yankees? Why can't he manage a baseball team? Simply because he doesn't know enough about baseball, despite being creative and despite being a very clever problem solver. It's clearly catch-22. But only if you've read Joseph Heller's book and you know what catch-22 means. As my honourable friend said when she was speaking, she quoted the famous phrase from Isaac Newton, "If I can see further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." And by standing on the shoulders of giants, he means building, not a 7-foot person, he means building on the knowledge of all the scientists and mathematicians who came before him. Isaac Newton had been taught and had learned what had been thought and said in science and in mathematics and in physics up to that point. Had he not been taught those things, had he had a competence-based curriculum about sitting under a tree and waiting for things to happen, I suspect he would not have understood the consequence of an apple falling on his head. As Daniel Willingham has said, education is about long-term memory, ensuring that we have facts and knowledge securely embedded in our long-term memory. Now, one thing we can agree on this debate is that the title of the motion is pejoratively drafted. No one wants pure, isolated facts. We want a knowledge-based curriculum. But I urge you to vote for the motion, notwithstanding the biased way that it's drafted, because you believe, as we do on this side, in a knowledge-rich curriculum. Of course, schools should develop the whole pupil, but the dangers of the ideology that are all too prevalent at conferences like this is that it flies in the face of all the evidence. The research is clear. Pupils need to be taught a broad body of knowledge so that they can in turn become experts. And the evidence from PISA supports that scientific research. In their most recent report, all but 3 countries recorded statistically significantly higher results with teacher-led instruction, and the most important factor of which was the teacher explaining ideas and giving pupils knowledge. Opponents of a knowledge-based approach to education in the 21st century are the latest in a long line to make this fallacious argument. It ignores the evidence from cognitive science, it ignores the PISA research, and it ignores over a century of debate in education. Thank you very much. I urge you to vote for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Gibb. Thank you, and thank you for your colleague as well, Daisy Christodoulou. Now, to sum up against, are you, Mr. Schleicher, your lead counsel again? Please take the floor. Thank you.
Thanks again. And I want to sort of start with, we have heard that skills depend on knowledge, and I don't think anybody disagrees with this, but I think equally true is that knowledge depends on skills. We develop an advanced understanding on knowledge through actually our capacity to think and to think creatively, and if we don't foster one without the other, we are going to put up students for failure. We have heard about creativity applying to a specific disciplinary context, and I agree with this. At the very same time, we need people today in today's society who are able to think across the boundaries of subject matter disciplines. Creativity is about connecting the dots where the next innovation is going to come from. We heard that there was apparently a correlation between, being good on knowledge and being good on thinking skills, apparently from international tests. This is surely not a fact. This is fake news. In fact, again, the UAE is a great example, the Russian Federation is a great example, the Czech Republic, I could name you a whole list of countries that are doing perfectly fine on the reproduction of subject matter context, and where students dismally fail when they have to apply their knowledge creatively, where they have to demonstrate that they can think, when they have to demonstrate that they can think like a scientist, think like an historian, think like a mathematician, which is what we want our children to be. So one doesn't come with the other. If we do just filling up children with pure facts, we will not get the kind of creative and imaginative citizens that we need today. And I want to come to the last part. What about musics? What arts? Are we going to forget about those important subjects? Actually, if we read the brain research in the latest years, we see how important the reinforcing factors are between, for example, music and creative skills, between music and mathematical skills. There are many ways of how children learn, and we need to engage children in different ways of learning. This is not about the reproduction of facts. What about ethics? What about, making judgments? All of those things require students to learn advanced thinking skills, and this is not against a knowledge-based curriculum. It's about the integration, a holistic view of learning, and that's why I urge you to vote against the motion that it is enough to fill the heads of people with facts. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Schleicher. And so, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, we move to the vote. I remind you, you take up that clicker. If you could all get your clickers in your hands. Last time, remember, it's A for 4, B against, C is undecided. It was for 20%, against 67, and undecided 13% in play. Please cast your votes, as they say, and let's see how we go. And there's the counter. So be sure you've got 10 seconds to get your vote in. See which way it goes. Has the passion injected by Mr. Gibb and Ms. Christodoulou, has the stern defense put up by Mr. Schleicher and Mr. Zinni done the job? And here we go. Whoa, look at that. That's quite, so if you can't see, that's 448 against a 42, undecided. So as I understand it, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The ayes. Just to inject some Brexit themed into it, the ayes. You recognise that, Mr. Gibb? Keep the applause ringing out, please, for, in no particular order, Daisy Christodoulou, Andreas Schleicher, Nick Gibb, and Gabriele Zinni. If you've enjoyed this, I've been Nick Ferrari. If you haven't, I'm Vanessa Feltz. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you.